Hello and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 116 of Paranormal NL Podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Pocket Casts, and also on YouTube. I'm your host, Jen. For tonight's show, let's give a big shout out to who introduced me to tonight's guest. Big shout out to Joe De Joyos with the Woodline Paranormal Podcast from Texas, USA. And Joe was on PNL Podcast Season 2, Episode 103. Go check him out, guys. Happy back to school week for those folks listening in Canada from Newfoundland and Labrador. And now it's time to grab a nice beverage and pull up your cozy chair and listen into your favorite podcast. Paranormal NL Podcast is a place where the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. PNL Podcast also believes in supporting people, places, and things to promote paranormal tourism and paranormal networking all over the world. A big thank you again to all the PNL Podcast alumni guests from Season 1 and 2, and of course our fans. We want to hear your stories. Do you have any paranormal, metaphysical, UFO, cryptid creatures, folklore, historical, books, or tales of the weird you'd like to share as a guest on my paranormal podcast? Please reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail, and you can see the P&L email in the episode description. After your episode, you'll become part of the P&L Podcast Alumni Network, and make sure you click on the bell or like and subscribe and follow along on whatever platform you're listening in or watching on to get updates for new episodes. Also, head on over to Facebook and join our group, Paranormal NL Podcast Group. Find upcoming new PNL episodes in the featured section of the group. Or listening in to our fans, PNL is now on YouTube, Instagram, and PNL now has a Facebook page for fans who are not on Instagram. For Instagram Reel drops in a spot for the PNL Bog Team Investigation Facebook Go Lives. That's right. Stay tuned for a new branch of Paranormal NL Podcast with the Bog Team, a boots-on-the-ground paranormal investigation team doing local historic investigations in Newfoundland. Now, fans asked us, and Paranormal NL Podcast merch and the new PNL Bog Team merch is now available on TeePublic with lots of different logo designs and swag items that our fans asked to choose from, like handbags and all that other good stuff. Now, let's get on with the show. I'm going to pull onto our StreamYard stage here tonight. We've got, so far, Mr. Steve Ward, and he's coming in with us from all the way in West Virginia and Point Pleasant, home of the Mothman. And we got coming in hot here. Here we go. We got Miss Susy. I hope I pronounce it right. Bastille.
Nailed it.
The Pukwudgie Whisperer from Connecticut. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Yeah,
great for having us.
Thanks for being on the show tonight. Now, tell us more about the high strangeness factor.
Well, Andy Mercer and I started it about 5.5 years ago, and it was I'm associated with Mack Maloney's Military X-Files as well.
Oh, I love Mack. Hello, Mack. When I was telling you about things dropping, that was on Mack's episode.
Oh, cool. Well, and Susie's also part of it as well, and so is Andy.
Awesome.
About 5.5 years ago, we were invited on the flagship Paranormal UK radio network show.
Yes.
And it was Mac. Commander Krober couldn't make it, and Juan was there, so I was a substitute. And usually it was Mark Johnson and Irene Allen Block, but I think Irene was under the weather. And if my foggy memory remembers correctly, Andy was in substituting. So Andy and I kind of hit it off. We, have some of the same ideas about the paranormal. And then the next day, Irene contacted me and she said, "Would you like to have your own show?" And I was flabbergasted. And I had to ruminate on it. And I asked Mac what he thought. He said, "Yep, go for it." And I'd always thought I wanted a show since I encountered I don't know if you're familiar with Ghostly Talk. They're not broadcasting right now, but they're out of the Detroit area. And they actually started their podcast in 2002. And nice. I started listening to them in 2006.
Yeah.
And I just thought how cool it was that these guys, just amateurs that put all this together, could talk to all these fascinating people. And so
that's what it's all about, Steve and Susy, talking about fascinating people.
And that's that's how it started. And so Andy couldn't be on all the time as a co-host because he had a real job. And I didn't mind. I wanted to do some solo to make sure I could do it. Andy was there for the first episode, and now he's there much more frequently. He's got his own publishing company now. So anyway, that's how it started. And fairly recently, Susy's been on board. So it's been a lot of fun. And we also have the Paranormal Book Club, which broadcasts once in a while.
Fun, good stuff. Yeah, we'll have to talk more about all that. Susy, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted, like Steve was talking about, wanting to do podcasts to talk to fascinating people. And that's why I like it too. But I want to give Steve more credit too, because I recently started experiencing paranormal for the first time in my life within like the past 6 months or so. If I didn't have Steve and Andy to talk to, I might have thought I was going crazy. So I think podcasters need some credit for giving people like safe places and like letting people know that they're not the only ones out there. So I think like what we all do is real important also.
Yeah. Welcome to the club, Susy, right? I mean, until a lot of us are skeptics before we have an experience, and then when you do, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, wait a minute, maybe there is something to this, right?
Yeah, and I was always both a skeptic and a believer, I'd say. But you believe on like a different level once you've experienced something unexplainable, for sure.
So who wants to go first on some of their experiences?
I only have one.
Maybe
Susy should give a couple of hers, and then we'll do an intermission with mine, and then she can do a couple more.
All right. Let's go, Susy. What you got?
So mine get a little bit convoluted. I kind of had, before I would finally admit it was paranormal, I had a couple years of this one reoccurring nightmare and also objects disappearing, but specific objects that were like very important to my day-to-day life. Mostly my headphones, which I cannot live without. And then, or my mascara.
Your mascara.
They're like the two things that I can't leave the house without, right? And then they'd, reappear in the middle of my living room randomly and things like that. The dreams I was having, it would be I was back in my hometown, which already it's a bad time. I'm from a tiny, small-minded town. And I am at this house helping this old lady on her farm, and I go to leave, and the transmission is missing from my car. And the house I knew was an actual house. I recognized it. I never knew who lived there, but I used to have to go by it on the school bus and all that.
Right.
And then when I realized my transmission is missing, I go to the woman whose house it is to ask for help.
Right.
And instead of her helping me, she basically starts screaming at me that I can't leave, that I'm stuck there. I have to keep working for them. And, at one point I tried to run away and she had like two farmhands grab me. And that's kind of where it ends. But because I recognized the house, I decided, like after having this dream a few times, I decided to call my mother and ask her if she knew like who had lived there. And she said, that's the house your grandmother grew up in. And the woman you're describing sounds like your great grandma, who was actually really mean. So it kind of sounds like her. And she sent me a picture that she had. It was the woman from my dreams. Absolutely.
Oh, really?
100%. Yep. And I kept having these, like they'd come, like I'd have them for a few weeks. I'd stop for a while. I'd have them for another few weeks. So I'm like I felt like there was some kind of message or mystery or, you know, something. And I went down like all of these rabbit holes, finding out about my family more. And nothing I found was good. I found all bad things. And, you know, I never really resolved anything or, you know, figured out what was causing it. And then I think it was probably this spring. I think it was April. I decided to go to the house.
That was going to be my next question. Did you visit the house? Okay.
Well, yeah. And I actually happened to meet the next door neighbor randomly.
Yeah.
While this is happening. So that was another kind of strange coincidence that popped up in there. But when I finally like worked up the cojones to finally go to the house, I pulled up in front of it and I'm just kind of staring at it. And
you're like, should I go in?
Yeah, because no one has lived in it for years.
Okay.
And it was on the market at the time. And I like stepped out of my car and I'm standing in front of it and I see smoke.
Ooh.
And I kind of walked around the side of the house and there was like an outbuilding that had collapsed that was on fire.
Oh.
And like it just happened to catch on fire for no apparent reason as I pulled up. And so I had to call the fire department and then make up an excuse why I was there. And it's it's a small town, so I actually had to go grab the neighbor to like get buckets to throw dirt on it and stuff. So that was like a whole thing. And I said, okay, like I'm just done with this. Obviously I shouldn't go in that house and I'm just going to forget about it and not pay this mean woman who's screaming at me in my nightmares any more attention. And that has seemed to work, you know, and I had, this is probably like, you know, 6 months into the dreams. Somebody told me like, just talk to her.
Right.
And so I started to do that. And I think
in the dream?
No, while I was awake.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah.
I had tried to do lucid dreaming and that didn't work well for me, but I just, you know, sat and just actually I was sitting where I am right now and started talking to her, but I'm a redhead and I got a little bit worked up and I might have started yelling.
Oh, you were provoking. All right.
I said what I had to say. And I got up and I walked across the room and I had a TV on top of my dresser. And as I'm walking by, the TV flies off the dresser.
Ooh.
And it landed like right behind me as I'm walking by. And I had like a runner on the dresser, like a long doily. Didn't move. Just the TV did. So that was weird timing for sure. On that.
That's a high strangeness factor right there.
Yeah. And actually, good segue because Steve's story involves a TV also.
Oh,
that's right.
Yeah.
Actually, 3
tell
TVs.
Us more, Steve. And tell us who your friend is sitting next to you in the chair with the long tail.
That's Shadow.
Hi, Shadow.
She's not getting along with the other cats too well.
Oh yeah.
I you know how some people identify with inanimate objects these days?
Yeah.
I identify as a cat lady. So now,
well, I hear you. I've got some 4-legged friends here too. Yeah.
Well, I always preface this tale by telling about how I never experienced anything. I actually have one other tiny experience that may not be anything, but this is a big one. And that double row of aluminum foil I wear under my clothes has always served me well, except this one time. So I'm out. This is before I was still living in Michigan. I came down to see a couple buddies of mine. And we went into the infamous TNT area where the Mothman was seen.
Right.
One of the igloos, the bunkers had just blown up the week before. Somebody had some unstable explosives in there or something. It blew the concrete top off and the doors out. You can still go and see it. It's all grown over. It is so cool. If you ever get to the TNT area, you got to go down Igloo Road number 7 and go far enough to see this. Okay, so they went home And I went back to my motel. I was heading back to my motel. And before I thought, well, you know what? I want to see if I can go into the TNT area at night alone. If I have the, as Susy said, the cojones to do it.
Now,
So
Steve, for the people listening all over the world who don't know what this is, the TNT area, can you explain?
It was they nicknamed it the TNT area ever since it was constructed during World War II. They made explosives for the war effort, and they stored them in 100 of these concrete bunkers. Now it's the McClintock Wildlife Area. Some of these bunkers are rented out to private interests and so forth, and hopefully most of them don't have explosives in them. But
Right, yeah.
so it's a really creepy area. We take people out there on Saturday night for the TNT hayride during the Mothman Festival, and it's really cool. So I went out there. I had my camera. I had a digital recorder duct taped to a flashlight. I looked like a paranormal investigator. So all I did is I got off Igloo Road number 7, went to Igloo number 2, just kind of looked around, took some pictures, and it was like the end of May, and all the bugs and frogs were out. It was like deafening. So I went back to my car, and I'm driving back down Route 62 into Point Pleasant. I experienced a couple flashes of light, like a strobe, and I couldn't quite see where it was coming from or what was going on. And I was so stupid, I didn't try to mark the place on the road where this happened so I could come back the next day and check it out. I was being the worst paranormal investigator you could imagine. So I drove back to my motel, which was across the river in Ohio. And again, nothing happens to me. I opened the door, the TV set turned on by itself, and started flipping steadily through stations. And I thought, holy crap. So I did what any intrepid paranormal investigator would do.
Debunk.
I unplugged the TV and went to bed.
Okay.
So now, there's a postscript to this, 2 postscripts. A year later, the same month, now this is one of these older style TVs, not a smart TV, were a couple buddies of mine who they actually fly the Mothman during the festival and portray the Men in Black by day. And we're crammed into a room together to save money because we're cheap. And the TV set turned on by itself and didn't do anything else. I thought, that's weird. And the next day, a couple of us came in to get something. And the TV set turned on by itself again and flipped through a couple stations. So that time we tried to get a little scientific and try to, aim the remote through the wall and all that stuff. Nothing.
Right, yeah.
A few years later, at the Mothman Festival, some 2 couples that we know are in the next room, which is a corner, and it's a bigger room that 2 couples can share. And they have a smart TV. They have one of these bigger ones, and they're having trouble with the volume. So the volume keeps getting lower and lower, and then they turn it up, and then it blasts, and they have to turn it down again. And then all of a sudden, a pop can flew off the dresser next to them. Now, I have no explanation for it, and the way I always end this story is that the TNT area was a burial ground. There are all kinds of people really buried out there from past wars and so forth. If I brought something back with me, thank God the poor sap is still there flipping channels and never came home with me, because I don't think I could really deal with that.
No, he was trying to find a good war channel by the sounds of it. Couldn't find anything. No, but that's interesting though. Yeah, I've heard a lot of different. I've had my own weird TV experience in palliative care unit because I'm also a nurse, and it was on a night shift, and you're going in, and I think one of the ambulance crew were in there and used it for, I don't know, they were waiting for somebody. And I went in later to go turn it off because we didn't have security in this little tiny little cottage place. And I was like, oh, can't find that remote. Can you turn off the TV for me? Click. All right. Can you do the lights while you're at it? Click. Okay, I'm out of there.
Well, you remember the end of Poltergeist, right? Where they pushed the TV set out on the landing.
On the landing.
You remember the little girl was entranced by what was ever going on the TV. At the very end, they go to the hotel. I did not do that. I did not push it out.
You didn't push it out? Now, Steve, for the people listening around the world, I'm having Spooky Japan coming on soon, and I don't know if Japan knows what Mothman is. Do you want to explain to the folks listening if they're tuning in from Japan or somewhere else in the world?
They do. They love the Mothman. They've done shows on it. There have been a lot of Japanese that have come to the the Mothman
Nice.
Festival, to check it out.
Love it.
The Mothman, back on November 15th, 1966, there were two couples, the Scarberries and the Mallets. They were out driving around the TNT area, two married couples, and they did something that they used to call chasing Parkers. So they would sneak up on people that were in a warm embrace in their car and turn the lights on behind them to, freak them out a little bit. So they're just having a little bit of fun. So they're driving by the dirt road where the old North Power Plant used to stand. They dismantled most of this area back right after World War II. And Linda Scarberry said, "What's that man doing standing in the road?" Well, that man spread his wings by about 10 feet. And then they noticed the red eyes, and it kind of shuffled toward the old North Power Plant. They took off, and this thing followed them into Point Pleasant. And it was about 6-7 foot tall, roughly humanoid, again, a 10-foot wingspan, red glowing eyes. And then many other people saw this. They actually went to the police, and you can see their reports handwritten out in the Mothman Museum. Jeff Wamsley has done a phenomenal job of collecting all the articles. He's got displays and so forth. There are 5 different documentaries running in the museum. It's just so well done.
And I think behind you, I see some red eyes. Is that a Mothman?
That's a Mothman shower curtain.
There he is.
That's I have a really expensive studio here. You can tell, for about $30, I guess. But you also can go play Mothman blacklight mini golf upstairs, which is a blast. The graphics and the way they've designed it is fantastic. And they also have a Mothman escape room now, which people really love.
Okay.
And there's also the Point Pleasant Trading Company, where you can buy more souvenirs. And then there's down the street, there's a Bunker 304, which is kind of a vinyl shop. So Jeff Wamsley and his family have just really transformed this place. And of course, the Mothman Festival is coming up pretty soon, which I'm a part of. And
so tell us more about the festival for paranormal tourism.
Well, you have, up and down Main Street, you've got everything. You've got food, T-shirts on the road that's perpendicular, the side road where the Mothman statue stands. You have the speakers usually have their tables, and we have speakers for 2 days. On Saturday and Sunday, I will be speaking about the Shaver mystery. Right there,
Oh.
See that guy?
Okay, him. You have to talk about him later.
Okay, but it's thousands of people, and it's hard to find a parking space. It's really grown over the years. But
When
people
is
just
it?
every third weekend in September. This year, I think it's the 21st and 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. So
book ahead for next year if you want to go.
right, or if you're close enough to drive, take a road trip.
Right? Yeah, it's fun stuff. For sure. Thanks for sharing that about the Mothman.
And throughout the year, more people saw this thing, very credible people, and the whole thing culminated with the collapse of the Silver Bridge, 13 months to the day that they first saw the Mothman.
Have you ever heard the military talk about, they have the jetpack and they were trying to say that, that was a guy in a jetpack, or, it was a large horny owl, or all these different theories?
Or a sandhill crane, or
Susie shaking her head, yeah.
I know a guy, I don't know if you've ever come across a place called Tudor's Biscuit World. Maybe you don't have them in Canada. They make the best breakfast. Anyway.
Okay.
There's this old timer there that swears it was his buddy Bob or something like that put on a Mothman costume and started scaring everybody, and that started the whole thing. And I said, well, what about the UFOs and all this other stuff? He says, you know how that goes. So
I heard recently a man who was mayor of Point Pleasant in the early 80s is now claiming he had on some kind of bird suit and was scaring people that were parked.
That might be the guy.
But that doesn't explain the bridge. That's just too weird, right?
Well, but people were seeing all kinds of strange lights, UFOs come overhead. There was some Men in Black phenomena. There were animal mutilations.
Entered cold.
Entered cold.
What was that last thing? Oh, it was cold. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you a funny story here. There used to be a lady named Vi. She had a beauty parlor, and now her daughter works at another one. Well, my buddy Brian from Tennessee, he has the gift of gab. He knows everybody. So we went in there and talked to her a few years back, and she said she knew a couple of guys that went into an area. It was another kind of a lover's lane. All kinds of cars are parked there. They each had a big feather pillow and a shotgun. They threw the pillows up in the air, shot the pillows, feathers went all over, and they said, "Mothman!" And they cleared out pretty quickly, according to them.
Oh, that's a great way to scare a lot of kids. Susy, talk to me about the Pukwudgie Whisperer. For people listening who don't know what a Pukwudgie is, I know people are going to do the wedgie jokes, right, with the underwear.
You know what? That never occurred to me.
No?
Oh, thanks, Jen. He's never going to drop that one now. So, don't imagine a whole lot of people know what Pukwudgies are, but they would be familiar with the general concept of little people because they have every culture around the world has some kind of versions. You have
Newfoundland and Labrador, they're the fairies, but our fairies are very evil, though.
Yep. And then you have like the duendes, you have gnomes, elves, things like that. There are like every culture has their own version of little people. Pukwudgies are one of the more infamous, I'll call it, tribe of little people that are near me. They're in Southeast Massachusetts mostly. But the word Pukwudgie is actually an Ojibwa word. But they're both Algonquin tribes, so they use the same word. Sometimes you also hear the same word used in Indiana. But the Indiana ones look a little bit different than the ones we have here. So New England Pukwudgies, they kind of look like if Danny DeVito and a porcupine had a baby.
Okay.
So about 3 feet tall, bipedal, but they have porcupine quills on their head and their back. The ones in Indiana really just look like little people, literally just people that are littler, but they have blonde hair and they wear it in a bowl cut. They have these pointy ears that just stick out from their little bowl cuts, and they're spotted wearing blue smocks, they're described as.
So I wonder who does their hair. That's what I
Well, and who's making the clothes? Do they have a factory?
Right. Well, they do it themselves. I guess they have their own little hairdresser and stuff, right?
Yeah, the ones
or maybe not. Maybe it's like COVID and they're using the bowl to cut their hair.
It could be. Yeah, we saw some bowl cuts during COVID lockdowns for sure.
But with these Pukwudgies, though, is it only out in the woods, or do they? Where do you see most of them?
They are generally spotted in an area called the Bridgewater Triangle, which is like the Bermuda Triangle but way cooler.
Tell us more. Bridgewater Triangle.
Yep. So it was the name was coined in the 70s by Lauren Coleman, who now has the Cryptid Museum in Maine. Okay. If anyone in that area wants to stop and check that out, there's one in Portland. It is known for all types of high strangeness. So you have Bigfoot sightings, UFO sightings, just ghosts left and right all over the place, and some more unique cryptids like Pukwudgies. There's also a lot of strange animal sightings, things like giant snakes. Sometimes they're described as being as big around as a tree trunk.
Okay. I could see that with down in the Amazon or whatnot. Some of those get out people's houses and stuff.
Yeah, they would not survive the winters here, though. We don't have
No, true.
Yep. And it's called the Bridgewater Triangle. I'm trying to get it rebranded because it's not a triangle. And there's actually kind of, in my opinion, from the research I've done, there's kind of like almost two separate areas. I would like to rename it the Hockomock Blob because it is a blob shape, and the center of this high strangeness area is a place called the Hockomock Swamp.
Oh, okay.
and now it's like a wilderness preserve, but it was a sacred place for the Wampanoag people, whose land that is, and it was a burial ground, but also extremely sacred to them, and also had strange occurrences, before Europeans even got here. Hockomock means the place where the spirits dwell.
Interesting. Yeah, here in Newfoundland and Labrador, I know there's I guess more so in Labrador, I would say, we have a lot of indigenous different cultural things that they have. And I really want to delve more into that. And it sounds like you've already delved into it in your area. Definitely.
Yeah, one of my other areas of interest is ancient stone sites, which overlaps the paranormal a lot.
They do. They do.
Yep. Both of my recent experiences have been at stone sites. One, I was actually following GPS coordinates out in the woods looking for this site, and I saw an orb or a spook light. Like the word for him here is Taipei Wonkas, but you have them, different words for them all over. So yeah, that was the first time I admitted I had a paranormal experience, I'll say. Because it was something like blatantly, obviously, unexplainable. And I'm me, so I'm out in the middle of the woods.
Was this more, may I ask about the orb, was it more metallic or was it more just light kind of thing?
It was light, and it was almost like, the best I can describe it is like there was a solid light, but then like an aura around it that didn't seem as solid, and it was red and about the size of a beach ball, and then it kind of turned to more of like an orange color, and then I lost it, disappeared like behind a tree. I lost sight of it.
Were you doing any CE5 stuff when you saw it?
Nope.
No? Interesting. So it just no, because I recently had somebody send me some pictures who they couldn't figure it out. So I sent it to a local photographer, professional, and they said, I can't debunk this as being AI or not real. It looks real. So because you do get some interesting stuff with the orbs, right? This was out in the woods somewhere,
Yeah, I actually, the first thing I did was I took my phone out to Google like what the humidity was and if there was any seismic activity, because that's something that can cause like not ball lightning, but phenomena like ball lightning.
Right.
And I had looked deeply into that because that's one of the things that happened up
or swamp gas, right?
Right. That's one of the things that happens in Hockomock a lot is these orbs. And I wasn't there. I was in Eastern Connecticut, but that was the first thing I did. And then out of this was born the Susy cam, which Steve is a big fan of. Because my first instinct was not to take my phone out and take a picture. I kind of stared at it in disbelief. And then I started Googling seismic activity. So I got a GoPro that I wear when I'm out, just in case. Because, I figure I can't get my phone out fast enough when my cat's doing something cute. I'm never going to be able to get it out if I see a UFO or something.
Right. So do you strap it on your head or your chest, or where do you put it?
I usually do my backpack strap.
Yep.
And I do post the videos, but don't watch them if you get motion sickness. Because I'm 5'2", so sometimes I'm like climbing over rocks and it's a little bit bouncy out there.
I'm a big fan of the Night Viz trail cam with the video and audio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you ever have any other stories that you want to share that, when you think of the high strangeness factor that's just so weird, you just can't explain? I know you said a lot of ones about your TV and whatnot. And also the Pukwudgie himself. That's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to request Steve tell one of my favorite high strangeness stories, which is the pancakes.
Pancakes.
Oh, Joe Symington.
Okay.
Okay. This is a bizarre one. Joe Symington and the cosmic pancakes from outer space. Now, Joe Symington is a plumber by trade and a chicken farmer by day. This is April 1961 near Eagle River, Wisconsin. And he's out finishing up his late breakfast dishes, and he hears this god-awful noise. It sounds like, he said, knobby tires on a wet pavement. And he looks outside, he sees a classic flying saucer, with two inverted bowls. And there's a door that's open. He can see inside. There's people in there. They don't look too scary. And he walks up, and they're wearing coveralls and knit caps. And one of them, it's kind of a small craft. One of them looks like he's cooking something on a flameless grill behind him. And one guy hands him a chalice, a bowl that looks like it's made out of the same copper or chrome or whatever that the craft is made out of. And he kind of indicates through gestures he wants water. No speech, no telepathy. So Joe goes to his well, gets him some water. He says he can't look at this guy directly in the eyes. There's something creepy about him. And so it looks like they're cooking something like pancakes or cookies on this grill. And they give him a few of these in return. And then they close up the hatch and it takes off. It very much, if you, I don't know if you're familiar with Jacques Vallée and Passport to Magonia. He makes a lot of comparisons with, various traditions of folklore and some modern day UFO experiences. Well, Joe he actually contacts the Air Force. The Air Force comes in and investigates. Even Dr. J. Allen Hynek is there. Everybody believes Joe is telling the truth, but they think he must have fallen asleep and just had a dream, which might explain why the pancakes tasted so bad. But they actually decided to spend taxpayers' money and test one of these pancakes. So in the meantime, Joe gets interviewed by the local judge. And the local judge said he believed Joe was telling the truth as he knew it, but he said, so what did these guys look like, little green men? And he says, well, no, Judge, they were kind of swarthy like Italians. And the thing is, if you look at, I love to see patterns and parallels in these things. John Keel, who wrote his grand opus, Operation Trojan Horse, Mothman Prophecies came later. He talked about, many landings where people were seeing people like this. And the people were not terribly sophisticated when they would describe them. They'd say, well, they look kind of foreign, look like dark European types or whatever. And but there were a lot of these sightings taking place. This is before the Greys sort of came in and seemed to take over. So, but also some of the alleged Men in Black encounters are very similar. Yes. So there's kind of this bizarre pattern there of, and the thing is, if Joe's telling the truth, if this had happened 100 or 200 years ago, it would have been, they would have said Joe was visited by the fairies, even though they showed up in a strange metallic chariot. So then here's the cruncher here. Jacques Vallée, who again wrote Passport to Magonia, quotes extensively from Evans Walter Wentz, who was a theosophist. He wrote The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries in 1911. He went around interviewing people about their experiences with the fairies. These were in real time, not handed down from, the great uncle or whatever. And he talked to an Irishman that said, the fairies drink pure water, eat fresh meat, and they never take salt. So this may mean absolutely nothing. But when the Air Force came back with the analysis, they were very terrestrial in design, except there was no sodium. So I don't know. It's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. I know a researcher in Wisconsin named Chad Lewis, who has got a line on some people that said Joe had other experiences afterwards, but he just kept his mouth shut because of the, you can see him on
the hoopla, yeah,
YouTube and everything. And one guy asked him, he said, Joe, if they came back, would you take a ride in their spaceship? He said, no, the food's awful. He actually said that. So that's one of the wildest experiences, but there are so many like that kind of defy explanation.
Yeah, it's interesting that Hynek was there, you know? I mean, it had to be a lot of interest to have him go there and spend the money to send him. Of course, he did try to send out a lot of other stuff, like to try to throw people off, I think, right?
Well, no, he actually, Hynek, he started out being a skeptic. He was an astronomer at Northwestern University, but he began to believe that there was really something to this. But when he came to Michigan, when they had that flap there in March of 66, and he suggested that some of the sightings might be marsh gas. And so he became a laughingstock. He didn't, you know, he was trying to straddle the fence because he was still tied to Project Blue Book. But later on, he became one of the good guys, started the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois, and was able to separate himself from the government.
Yeah, I think that's why he was, you know, like you said, he was kind of had his hands tied while he was with Blue Book. He couldn't really say much, could he?
But I was a kid. I remember seeing that interview, that press conference live. So, and he was showing a picture of George Adamski's flying saucer that he's supposed to take in a picture of, and he said it looked like a chicken brooder, which it kind of did.
Did it? So that must have been interesting for you to watch, for sure. Susie, you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, I always wonder about the food, because there's also the story. I think her name was Ann Jeffries.
Yes.
Yep, and she was going off into the woods and having rendezvous with what she thought was the Fae, and they were giving her bread, and she developed kind of healing powers, almost like she became like the village healer, and attributed that to, you know, these Fae creatures and the bread. But, you know, unlike the pancakes, she gave a piece of this bread to her brother at one point, who said it was the most delicious bread he'd ever had. So I think that might have had sodium in it, or this is like a small village and they just don't have good bread there, you know.
Well, you know, here in Newfoundland and Labrador, you're always supposed to offer the Fae folk bread. And I think it's got to be the hardtack bread, not just like bread. It's we call it hardtack. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Purity makes it. And it's like, you know, a lot of the sailors would take it with them on the boats and stuff because it wouldn't go moldy. You just kind of rehydrate it with a bit of water. And a lot of us use it in a dish called fish and brews. And that part would be the brews. So, yeah, that's what we offer our Fae here.
Yeah. And with Pukwudgies and little people in general, like my grandmother even did this when I was a kid, you would leave usually berries.
Berries. Okay.
Yeah, but some people will leave tobacco also, or, you know, other kinds of food. But
offerings, right?
Yep.
That's a popular offering, tobacco, especially, you know, in indigenous places for sure. But yeah, we could talk a lot about different stuff. I hear.
Are you familiar with David Paulides, Missing 411? He's got a whole series of books of mysterious disappearances. He talks about one of a young boy in Newfoundland, which he didn't take his bread with him. And so he disappeared for a few days. When he came back, he was in kind of a stupor and couldn't explain what had happened to him.
You know, I've heard a lot of people say if you don't bring the bread, then they'll take you away, they'll carry you away.
But there's also like general lore saying, you know, don't exchange anything with the Fae. Don't eat their food. Don't give them anything.
They're tricksters.
Yeah.
Well, our Fae are evil. They're not nice little fairies, right?
Well, are they evil or do they just have a bad reputation?
We like to say we have the queen of the fairies on Bell Island, and that's an interesting story there. They even have a little place that, you know, for our tourism where you can go and learn more about it over there. But and they also say here you're not supposed to tell anybody where they live, because then bad things happen to you.
Lore too, yeah. But I'd like to hear their side of the story before I assume they're evil, because you never know.
But you know, you might be talking to them for what you think is 5 minutes, and 5 weeks have passed.
Right? Yeah, different time zone thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that happens a lot, especially with UFO stuff for sure. Well, guys, yeah, we had a lot of interesting discussions, and thanks for being on tonight from the high strangeness factor. And maybe next time we can get Andy Mercer on from the Ninth Circle Press in the UK. He's into psychology too, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
He was that was his profession, and now he's publishing books.
Yeah. So I guess we can have a little bit of an off-air rap chat, but I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. And before we go, please tell everybody, Steve and Susie, where people can follow you and your work and all your good stuff that you do.
Go ahead, Susie.
So you can find me on YouTube at the Pukwudgie Whisperer. And the audio version of my interviews are now also on the Paranormal UK radio network, which is the same network as High Strangeness Factor and Mack Maloney's Military X-Files. And you can also find me, of course, on High Strangeness Factor with Steve and Andy Mercer. And occasionally on Mack Maloney Military X-Files, which the episode we just recorded, I was amazing on. So I'm just going to recommend that to everybody. So.
Plug away.
Mack show is a lot of fun. You can
I love Mack. Everybody tune into Mack. You're going to love him.
You can follow me on Mack Maloney's Military X-Files on the High Strangeness Factor. I'm on Facebook. Just type in Steve Ward in Point Pleasant, you'll find me. I usually work at the Mothman Museum on Saturday afternoons to greet people and answer questions for people. I've been following this since I was in junior high school when that first sighting took place. So little did I know I'd be following the Mothman even before he had a proper name.
So if you want to know anything about the Mothman, Steve Ward is your man, for sure. And thank you so much again for tuning in. And we can drop a few links in the description there when we're done so people can follow you. And again, everybody, follow Steve and Susie and all their socials that they just rhymed off for y'all. Okay. Thank you so much again for being on the show. And I hope y'all have a great Halloween. Stay spooky. I'm going to end the recording, but we'll stay on for a quick minute just to wrap up.